So my name is Victoria Battle. I am VerifyToday's marketing director. And for the next 45 minutes, for better or for worse, I'm going to be the host of your webinar. So I want to welcome you all to our first webinar of 2025. We're just all super excited to have you. I want to say thank you so much for joining. Some of you might be in your lunch right now or at your desk working. Either way, we're just so happy you're here. You may have noticed I have a Mardi Gras background. I'm really tired of this cold front that we're having, and so Mardi Gras is right around the corner. I'm in Houston, and so it's always a fun time for me, which means spring's almost here. So I decided to channel Mardi Gras today. We're going to have a couple housekeeping items before we get going. First, we're going to try and do these webinars monthly and talk about all things HR and employer wage verifications and everyone's favorite topic, fund tax credits that you might qualify for that you probably didn't know. So keep an eye out for the next webinar. I'll say the best way to stay up to date with these is to follow us on LinkedIn. So if you're not already, I really encourage you to do that. The next thing is our team will also be in Vegas next month for the IPPA show. If we have anyone here who's in Vegas, or going to the show who wants to meet up with us, grab coffee or dinner, please reach out to us. We want to be as accessible to you as possible. A little bit about VerifyToday, if you don't already know, we service HR, payroll, and tax professionals. We want you to be as successful at your jobs as possible. When you look good to your boss, that's a huge win for us. So continue to follow us, stay engaged. We're going to be putting out as much educational content as we can. We want to add as much value to you as possible. The last housekeeping item I have is the chat is open and live. So please feel free to engage in there, connect with anyone. Most everyone on here, I think, works in HR, or similar functions. So please get in there, meet people. For me, I know the best way I learn is from peers and talking to people. So I want to encourage that. For the Q&A, it's actually a separate feature from the chat that is open and live too. So go ahead and ask your questions live as Katie's presenting, and then afterwards we'll go through them and Katie will answer the questions. Speaking of chat, I want to kick this off with a question. I already told you guys where I'm joining from. I'm in Houston. I want to know where everyone's joining from and what the temperature is. It was about 27 degrees when I woke up, which is way too cold for Texas. So I want to know how cold or warm it is there. Oh, wow. Ohio. Yeah, no, 16 degrees.
16 degrees. Whew.
Not for me. Oh, we got a couple more Houstons. Oh, is it up to 40? Yes. Oh, 33 in Louisiana. Yeah. Oh, 1 degree now. Okay, so I want to be mindful of time. Let's go ahead and get into this. Today, we have a very interesting topic. I think one that can often be overlooked because it happens after an employee is already separated from the company, right? And that is unemployment claims. I have really learned a lot from Katie on this topic, so I'm really excited for you guys to hear from her. One of the things I've learned is that while this happens after an employee is already separated, there's really a lot you can do while the employee is still with the company to really minimize that impact of the unemployment claims. The other thing I've learned is that the tax implications of unemployment claims, that information feels very hard to find. It kind of feels hidden. And so we want to really give you guys an overview of what you need to know, how to apply this to your day-to-day as HR professionals, as well as what things to avoid with the claims process. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Katie. Before I turn it over to her, like I said, she's such a wealth of knowledge and she has quite the impressive background. And I know if she were to introduce herself, she wouldn't say all these great things about her. So I'm going to do it for her. Katie is VerifyToday's Vice President of Operations and Product. Katie has worked in HR for many years now. She also serves on the SIDES board, which within the Operations Committee, which for those of you who don't know, the SIDES board is the State Information Data Exchange System. And that is designed to streamline communication between employers, third-party administrators, and state unemployment insurance agencies. Katie's also a math whiz. She's got a master's in applied mathematics, and she's also a U of H professor. So Katie, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to nerd out and talk some unemployment today.
I think you have the right crowd. Nice cross for that. So we'll go ahead and jump in. We've already covered introductions. We're going to go over the impacts of unemployment claims on your organization. We're also going to talk about common misconceptions about the claims process, and we'll round it out with ways to enhance your claims process so that you're more successful. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Katie. Katie, if you could start by telling us at a high level what an employment claim can cost an employer.
Absolutely. So unemployment it's two factors, right? So the first is the individual claim. So on average, most claims cost $4,200 per unemployment claim that gets paid out. However, depending on your state and your tax rate, this can fluctuate. So even though it can seem small, not only does it have a huge impact for that individual claim, but it also has an impact on your tax rate. So it's something that it just keeps coming back to haunt you a little bit. So ultimately, unemployment claims can be really costly and can definitely hurt the bottom line. So I guess that kind of leads into how does a tax rate get decided for unemployment? So a lot of factors go into this. The first one being how much taxable payroll does your company have? So as your company grows and has more taxable payroll, that can impact your tax rate. The second question is, are you paying your taxes timely? Because if it's not timely, you can get an increased fee. And then the other thing is how many unemployment claims are being paid out against your company. So these three factors are the main things that make up your unemployment tax rate. And so what can you control there? Biggest things is you can control paying your taxes timely. But the other huge thing that you can control is the claims that essentially your company ends up paying out. And so that's when I talk about the cost of a claim, it's not just the individual claim, it's how that later then impacts your tax rate, because that tax rate is then paid out for every employee you hire. And so it's something that can, it impacts more than just that individual claim. Additionally, that claim, any claim you have paid out against your company, it sticks around for about 3 years. So just like a credit report, you can think of an unemployment tax rate kind of the same way as the things that are happening at your company, these separations, how they're handled, how you're responding, if you're responding timely, all of these things go onto your unemployment credit report per se. And in turn, that then affects what your tax rate is.
Katie, I've got a quick question there.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's my understanding that businesses can lower their tax rate. Is that correct? And can you kind of speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when you start a brand new business, you're assigned a tax rate. And then typically you have about a year of activity before you're assigned an experience rating. And then at that point, there's things you can do to affect your experience rating. So the first one, the biggest one, is to prevent claims from being paid out. So what this can mean is, if somebody is, if you hire somebody, you want to make sure that they're the right person for the job, right? If somebody is not performing the way you need them to, you want to make sure you're documenting that. You want to make sure you're giving them opportunities for improvement. So you have quite a bit of things that you can do as the employer to help prevent unemployment claims. Once again, when you bring somebody into a position, you want to make sure that they're the right hire, that they have the skill set, that the expectations are very clear about what the job requires. Document every single thing for every role. Because that's really the thing that the states are looking at. They don't want to pay out unemployment. They don't want people to be on unemployment. And so what they're looking at is, as the employer, Have you done everything possible to keep that person employed? Did they have, chances to, meet expectations, things like that? So that's a huge piece of lowering the tax rate. I mean, once again, paying your taxes on time, very important, everything like that. But getting into a situation where you aren't having separations, or that the separations were unavoidable, that's really the key. So kind of leading into that, there are a lot of common misconceptions about unemployment, something that a lot of people typically, don't even think about is like the first one is a lot of employers think that they get to decide who gets unemployment. And that's not the case. So for unemployment claims, when somebody is separated from your company, it is their right to file for unemployment. And then as the employer, it is your responsibility to provide the state with all information pertaining to that separation. So they want to know, when did that person get hired? When did they start working? When did they stop working? Who were they reporting to? What was the reason for the separation? If it's things like attendance, do you have copies of their attendance reports? If it's because of poor performance, do you have a laid out plan of what the expectations were, where you gave feedback, and where you had these discussions that the performance was not where it needed to be? Did they have the skill set going into the job to know that? If somebody was fired, why were they fired? And do you have documentation for it? So, this is something where whether or not somebody gets unemployment, it's not up to the employer. You provide all the information, and then the state makes a decision based off of what the law is. Is this person, should they be getting unemployment based off that separation? Another thing is that if you don't want to fight unemployment, like, oh, I'm okay with this person getting unemployment, I'm just not going to respond. Another big common misconception. Not responding to a claim is actually being non-compliant. So if somebody files for unemployment, even if it was somebody that was let go, or something, like that, you always have to respond to the state for unemployment. You have to provide all of the data, the information, documentation, everything like that, even if you don't want to fight it. And so what we've seen, especially in the last 5 years or so, is states really cracking down on employers and having that expectation that every claim should have a response, a timely response, and that by not providing that, you are not compliant with that state. So that's something that we're seeing an even bigger increase. Obviously, after COVID, fraudulent claims were rampant, and just the sheer volume of claims was outrageous. And so having employers responding timely became even more important, because once again, it's the integrity of the unemployment system, but it's also ensuring that claims aren't being paid out that shouldn't be paid out. So that's a very common pitfall for people. One thing that I wanted to talk about as well, I think I skipped past this slide, was what the unemployment rate can really do for your company, what the bottom line is. So here in this chart, you can see that based off your taxable payroll, there's a range of a minimum unemployment rate and a maximum unemployment rate. Now, this does differ by state, so some states are higher or lower. But here you can see that being on the lower end of this versus the higher end, it is a significant jump in what your tax rate is and what you're paying into the system for unemployment. And so the way that the states look at this is you pay in a certain amount, and then let's say that you have a lot of claims come in. Well, now that amount that you've paid out is not balancing with what you're paying in. And so at that point, they're going to up your rate because now they need more money from you to cover the claims because they're basing it off of their expected volume. And so now not only are you paying more in because you have a higher tax rate, but that affects your company as a whole. So if you start hiring more employees and you're growing, but your tax rate's also going up, that cost is exponential. So this affects every single person you're hiring and what you're paying in for every new employee. So it can be very significant, right? Even in these numbers of taxable payroll that we're looking at, even for taxable payroll of 500,000, that's typically a very small company of 6 to 8 people, and most companies are much larger than that and have a lot more employees. Taxable payroll is much more significant. So this rate, even just changing it a couple of percentage points, can be substantial to the bottom line. And from HR perspective, HR typically is considered, it's a necessary part of the business, but it doesn't ever bring in any kind of revenue or anything like that. And it's considered, non-strategic. But this is a place where by having a successful unemployment management system, you can actually save your company significant dollars. And that's something that HR can bring to the table that, in a lot of spaces they couldn't bring. So being able to reduce the taxable liability, getting that unemployment rate down, that's something that HR can present of, hey, because of our claim management, we've now reduced this tax rate by, 2%, which is in turn saving the company X amount of dollars. And so it becomes, an even stronger story of how this work is significant to the bottom line. All right, so now I'm going to jump and I want to talk a little bit about what could cause an employer to pay out a protestable claim. So a protestable claim is typically in a situation where the employee would not normally receive unemployment. So this could be somebody that quit, they stopped showing up for whatever reason, they have attendance issues, time issues, performance issues, just a situation where the employee had complete control of being employed, and due to their own reasons, they are no longer employed. Now, you would think it would be obvious, right? Hey, if somebody quit, they're not going to get unemployment. If somebody was fired, they're not going to get unemployment. However, this is a common misconception. If you are not handling your claims properly, these protestable claims could still be paid out. So what is important when we're looking at protestable claims to ensure you win these things? The first thing is actually responding to the state. If the state sends a request for information, providing that back. If they set a hearing, showing up for it. In a lot of these cases, if you don't show up, the employee automatically wins. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is documentation. Documentation is huge. So if you have a situation where somebody has poor performance or they have attendance issues or things like that, you've got to make sure that all of that is documented, that expectations are laid out. And this can even include policies. Do you have a policy about attendance? Do you have a policy about, showing up late for work? Do you have policies about, performance expectations? So all of these things are very, very important. Communication. Are you talking to the employee when these situations arise? Are you giving them opportunities to improve and to fix the issue? All of these things are what the state is going to want to see. They want to know that the expectations were clearly set out. The employee understood those expectations and agreed to them, right? It's getting them to sign a policy handbook agreement. That you gave them opportunity to improve if they were lacking somewhere. And then you're following through in the unemployment process if it gets to that point. So these are all things that, once again, the employer has complete control over. But without handling these things, you can most certainly lose a claim that you typically would not need to pay out. So as an employer, what can you do to really set yourself up for success? What can you do to ensure that your claim process is buttoned up, and that your win rate is very, very high, and that the only claims you're paying out are truly non-protestable claims, like somebody being let go. The first thing is smart hiring. When you're looking at a role, there's typically expectations for that role, and there's usually a skill set that's required for that role. So even whenever you're looking to bring somebody in for something, ensuring that this person has the ability that you're looking for the role and that the expectations are clearly set out is very important. So it starts all the way at the very beginning. The next one is policies. Have a handbook. Have your standard policies. Look at why you're typically having issues with employees and write a policy about it. And then provide this to the employee at the first day of work and have them read over it and acknowledge that they received the handbook and that they are going to adhere to the expectations in that policy handbook. The next thing is setting good expectations for documentation. So for your hiring managers, for your ongoing, managers on site, kind of looking at what your typical separation reasons are and building documentation around things that could lead to that separation. So if somebody's late for work, how is that documented? Where is it documented? How is that communicated up? Is there a threshold for how many times somebody is late before they're talked to about that situation? If somebody is in a role, do you set a 30, 60, 90-day expectations for them so that they know what they're supposed to be doing and what we're looking for? That's really important. So all of these things, once again, it's just kind of setting yourself up for success. And then as far as if you do get to a point of a separation, are you responding to everything? Make sure you're responding to all the claims. Make sure that you have comprehensive employment history. So having that documentation, providing everything upfront to the state where they have all the information. That's all very, very important. The state wants everything up front. So if you can provide it, that just makes it easier for them to make a decision on the initial claim level. And then with your appeals and hearings, make sure that you are going to them, that you're prepared, and that the relevant people within your company are sitting on those hearings. So, maybe it's the person that employee was directly reporting to, or somebody who's familiar with that termination. So all of these things, once again, they're pretty basic. We're not reinventing the wheel here. But, with a lot of companies, these things aren't always outlined, right? It's easy to not do these things or set these things up as you're growing quickly. Everybody's busy, wears a lot of hats. But ultimately it can cost you a lot in your tax rate. So these are things that we always encourage at least our clients to look at, but just employers in general. If you have unemployment claims coming in, whether it's 5 or 500, these are all great practices to have in place to ensure that not only are you staying compliant, but you're saving your company as much money as possible when it comes to unemployment claims.
Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, of course.
We are about at the Q&A portion of the webinar. I have not seen any questions come in through the chat. If we don't get any, if any questions come up later, feel free to reach out to us. We're on LinkedIn. Our contact information is on the website. Again, we want to be as accessible to you as possible. We're also going to send this recording and the slides out. I had a couple questions for you, Katie. How long, just generally speaking, does the process take? I guess for those of us who aren't super familiar, a couple weeks or a couple months? Does it just depend?
It depends on the state. So the initial claim process happens pretty quickly. Usually after the separation, that can happen within a couple of weeks. But from there, the determination, appeal, hearing, things like that, that can take several months depending on how complex the case is. So for things like somebody being let go, those are pretty straightforward, should be buttoned up within a month or so. But if it gets to a more complicated separation where it does go to a hearing and that there's lots of documentation and things like that to go over, it can take a little bit longer. But that's another piece of this pie, is monitoring these claims from start to finish, and even auditing benefit charges once a claim happens. And this is why a lot of companies choose to outsource this, is because there is a lot of pieces to keep up with, and the process isn't always very straightforward or quick. So.
Gotcha. And so what would you had mentioned, if you have 500 unemployment claims, I cannot even imagine having to work through all that. What would you, but that's real life, right? Like some of us do. What would you recommend for people who, for those of us who have just a ton of unemployment claims, like, to kind of work through them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to have a good process. You have to have a very knowledgeable person on your team handling this. And once again, I mean, some companies build entire teams to manage unemployment claims. Some companies choose to outsource. Um, you know, uh, we're subject matter experts. This is what we do. This is what we do day in and day out. So it really depends on what the best fit for your company is. But yeah, I mean, it's very daunting. Unemployment is its own beast. There's a very small group of people that are experts at unemployment and know it as well as our team does. But ultimately it's a task you have to do. So finding a solution for it, whether internally or outsourced, is very important.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Katie. If there are no other questions, we are going to end this a little bit early. Again, I'm going to email out the recording and these slides. Thank you, Katie, for being here. Thank you, everyone, again, for being here. Any follow-up questions for Katie or the team, just shoot us an email. And that's all. Thanks, everyone.